In this lecture, we're talking about start and update, looking at the difference between those two, and we're going to write just a really little bit of code to make our game object slowly move across the screen. Let's get started. We're going to start with a challenge, and the challenge is to get the party started. I'd like you to create a new Unity project from Unity Hub using the Universal 3D pipeline as our rendering pipeline to add a ground plane into your project. That's a game object that will be a plane. And then to create your player using a cube as the game object. And you know what? Let's rename our player to something nifty. I'm going to call my player Dodgy because the player is going to be dodging stuff. So there's your challenge. Pause the video, take that on. I'll see you back here when you're done. I'm in Unity Hub. I'm going to click on Projects, and then up in the top right, New Project. Make sure I've selected the right version of Unity, which I've got wrong a couple of times in a row that you haven't had to watch, but lots of cursing at the screen. Universal 3D. Universal is great for most prototype projects we're going to be working on. If you want something that's AAA and really shiny and beautiful looking, then high definition is what you would go for. But for now, we're just going to go with Universal 3D. I'll rename my project to Obstacle Dodge because that's what I'm going to be calling it. And this is the correct location for me. I'm going to turn off Unity Cloud because I don't need it. Click Create Project. That'll take a while, so I'm going to pause the video and I will be back when it's ready. Okay, I'm back into Unity. It took about a minute for me to be up and running. You can see there's some information in our inspector and a Remove README Assets button. I'm going to click on that. I haven't clicked on it before. Proceed to get rid of the information there. Yeah, it just got rid of the stuff that we didn't need. That's cool. You can leave it or remove it, up to you. Now, first step of the challenge was to create a ground plane. So I'm right-clicking within the hierarchy, 3D Object, Plane, and I'm going to rename it to Ground while I'm here. I'm also going to click on R and just scale it up a little bit because I think I want it bigger. Next, we're putting a player. So right-click, 3D Object Cube. I'm going to rename this Dodgy the player, just so everyone who's watching knows that it is the player. And I'm going to squash Dodgy a little bit just to make Dodgy look kind of interesting, zoop, like that. And we've got this global volume that's sitting right underneath my cube. I'm going to pop it all the way over there. It doesn't matter where it is at this stage. We can just get it out of the road. Just so you can see what's going on in my world here, I'm going to create a couple of materials for colors. So right click, create material. I'll call this dark color. Click on the base map. I'll go down to something that is dark-ish and drag it onto the ground, just so we've got a way of contrasting our player. And you can see it's really shiny over on the side. That doesn't help with you viewing at home, so I'm going to turn the smoothness all the way down so it's a nice matte color, just a solid color there. Right-click, create material, and we'll call this green, because this will be the Game Dev TV green or thereabouts. Actually, you know what? I'll get the exact color. I've gone and found the color hex value for my Game Dev TV green. So when I click on the color picker here, all the way down the bottom, the hexadecimal, I can paste it in. This is what I've got from elsewhere that I figured out what it was from Photoshop. And now it's the exact color that I want, just in case you were wondering how to do that. Now I can drag green over the top of my character here, my player. Next, I'm going to put a little bit of structure to my folders down the bottom here. So while clicked on the assets directory, I'll right click, create folder, and I'm going to call this materials, and then grab the dark and holding shift, click on green. So I grab both of them at the same time, drag it into the folder. I'll right click, create folder again, and I'll call this scripts, and that is where we're going to put our scripts. You guessed it. So double click on scripts to go inside that folder, and now I'm going to create a new script in this folder. So right click, create, and I will create a mono behavior script, which is the standard Unity starting point script. So I'll click on that. Before I click anywhere else, I'm going to rename this to Mover. If you do happen to click anywhere else, you might get some problems. So make sure that you name it before you click anywhere else and accidentally bake in that placeholder name. And then the last step before I jump into playing around with this script and adding some code is I'm going to add the script to a game object. Why am I doing that? Well, a script or code that's sitting down here in our assets directory can't do anything because the game doesn't know about it yet. So I need to attach it to something in the world, to one of my game objects. And I can do that by dragging the mover script over my game object, or I can click on the game object, scroll all the way down the bottom, drag it into the empty area, or the last way I can click on add component and search for mover and then click on that to add the script. So add the script now in one of those three ways. And just to tidy things up a tiny bit, I'm going to close up the expandy box for Box Collider and for Cube Mesh and Mesh Renderer. We don't need to look inside those for now. So the next step is to double click on our mover script And if Visual Studio Code or whatever you're using is all set up nicely, you should see our code in front of you. Now over on the left, got the Explorer, which is basically showing our project structure. And you can see I created a folder called scripts. And within that, I've got the Mover script. I don't need to be looking at the Explorer for now. When you get bigger, busier projects, you do need to spend time in here, but I'll just click on the Explorer button. So it's all just code that's on my screen. So if this is the first time you're looking at code or the first time you're looking at Unity C# code, you might be looking at it saying, what's going on here? What does everything mean? We get some stuff that's already been put in there for us that gives us a helping hand. I'm not going to explain it all now. We'll talk about it throughout this project. We'll talk about what namespaces are and what using means. We'll talk about classes. We'll talk about public versus private. We'll also talk about what mono behavior is. And we'll be talking a lot about methods or functions. You can use those two words somewhat interchangeably. Basically, things that make things happen. So we've got start and update in this starting script that Unity has created for us. Now, what do we need to know about start at this point? What we need to know is that when our script or our code comes to life, and what I mean by that is when we click play, our play button to say, start the game, Dodgy the player is already in our scene. So at that moment, anything that is a component on Dodgy will be active. So the mover script will come to life, so to speak, which means start will be called or start will happen at that point. And then any code we have between our curly braces will be executed. So let's go ahead and write some code in here now. Just follow along with me, and I promise you as we go throughout this project, this will make a lot more sense. I'm going to start by typing in transform with a small t dot translate with an uppercase T, and then open and close parentheses, and then semicolon. We're starting off with the word transform, which is referring to the component that's on this particular game object. What does that mean? Well, this code is on this game object, and this game object has a transform. Transforms where the position, rotation, and scale lives and where we can manipulate those things. And then we've typed dot, which is the dot operator, which is saying access all of the things that transform can do or has access to. So I'm just going to delete translate for a moment. And you can see when I type dot, our IntelliSense should show us what we can do. So what transform is able to do for us, or access, it can access all these different things: find, forward, get child, get component. And if we scroll all the way down, you can see that in our list just here is translate, which is a method that's been created by the clever folks at Unity that allow us to move things. There's already the logic to know what this means when we type translate. And then within our parentheses here, the open and close parentheses, that's where we put some additional information to say, well, what sort of movement are we doing? And how fast do you want to go? And where do you want to go? So that's what we put inside these. This is where we pass in arguments because translate has some parameters. Those words might not make a lot of sense just yet, but we'll talk about that a bunch more. And then at the end, we need a semicolon, which is kind of like in regular talky language is a way of saying a period or a full stop, but in C# it wants a semicolon. Now, the reason translate has a squiggly line underneath it is it wants some arguments. It wants to know, okay, what's your X value, what's your Y value, and what's your Z or Z value? And there's squiggly lines underneath this because it's like, I don't know what an X is. Like, how far is an X? So I'm just using this as a representation to show that the X and the Y and the Z or the Z are these numbers just in here. So let's put some numbers in. I'm going to put in 1 for X. I'll put in 0 for Y and 0 for Z. I'll make sure that I've saved my script. So I'm going to go back into Unity. I'm going to grab my game window, which is where we see the game. We see what the camera is positioned and what the player is going to see. The camera is in a bit of a nonsense spot at the moment. It's not very close. Let's try something, just a little experiment. Click on main camera, F to focus on that. Scroll around a little bit if you need to be. What happens if we move it up? Oh, our game window changes because we've moved the position of the camera. What happens if we hit E and rotate it down a little bit? Oh, it rotates down towards the player. So I'm going to move in a little bit and down a little bit just to frame up my game object within the camera. So this is what the game's actually seeing. So now I'm ready to hit play and we'll see what happens over here. It goes boop and moves just one position to the right. If I click on the game object in my scene, you can see it's now got a value. It was at 0.07, I believe. Now it's at 1.07. So if I click stop, it will return back to the position it was before I clicked play. That's an important thing to know. And so let's jump back into our code now and have a look. That was in start, so it just happened once when we clicked play. If I grab all of this statement, highlight, Control X, and then paste this into update, we'll see something different. So what is update? As you can see, it's called once per frame. What's a frame? Well, a frame is every time our game calculates what should be happening in our world. And if we had 1 frame per second, the whole game would look like this. Blop, boop, boop. Because the whole system is saying, I'm only doing 1 thing per second. If we have, say, 60 frames per second, it's going to go and calculate all these things over the course of 1 second, maybe 60 times or 100 times or 30 times, depending upon how many frames per second our system is capable of doing. And that means that things can move a lot more smoothly than just old-fashioned stop animation, so to speak. So I'm just going to give ourselves a little bit of space to see what happens here, because when I click play, it is going to go flying. Aha, okay, I deliberately, well, not really. Okay, I made a mistake. I didn't save. So this is something good for us to learn early on, and I wasn't paying attention. It was in start. I hadn't saved. I'd moved it over to here, so the game didn't realize I'd made a change to my script. Now I've saved. Click on play, and now we're going to see way off into the distance. And why is it going so quickly? Well, we're moving 1 whole unit per frame. Let's make that smaller. Let's make it 0.01. So if we mouse over this, you can see cannot convert from double to float. Basically, Unity isn't quite sure what sort of number we've told it. Double, it's a type of number that allows us to have a lot of precision, and float is also a number that has decimal places that doesn't have as much precision, and it needs to know which of these ones do you want me to do. So we're going to be using floats pretty much always. There's not really any need for us to use doubles, and the way we denote that is put an F at the end of our number. So that's now a float. And Unity's like, okay, cool, I'm happy. We should be putting an F after the 0 and the 0, but the reason it didn't get mad at us when we did the 0 or the 1 is there was no confusion. It's like, okay, I can do what I need to do here, but we're going to put Fs after this now. It's good practice. Click on save, back over into Unity. Now, what do we expect to see? Well, I expect to see it move. Is it going to move quicker or slower? It's going to move slower when I click on play. It's moving at a nice slow pace. Okay, click the stop button. So that's all I wanted to cover in this lecture. It's just a very quick introduction to start and update, doing a little bit of code and making sure that it works in our game. Good work. I will see you in the next lecture.